I just noticed that everybody and their cousin seems to be picking up a Taurus G3C these days, like it's the ultimate budget carry gun. But once you actually shoot the thing past a couple hundred rounds, the cracks start showing, and I'm not just talking metaphorically. What's up, everyone? This is Sully from Line45, and today I'm going to drop a nuclear bomb by explaining why the Taurus G3C might just be the worst popular handgun you could throw your money at in 2025. Before I start, I would really appreciate it if you would push those buttons below. The subscribe button, the notification bell, all of them. This is not necessary, but those little clicks help a brother out. Plus, it pushes me to give you more valuable car-related content on your screen. Now buckle up and let's get back to the video. I've seen a lot of budget pistols come and go, but the Taurus G3C is the one gun that just keeps showing up. Gun shows, pawn shops, gun counters at Academy, even in folks' glove boxes when I'm at the range. It's like Taurus cracked some kind of code on what the average buyer wants to hear. Not what they actually need, just what sounds good on paper. 12-round mag compact frame striker, fired under $300. Yeah, I get the appeal. If you're new to guns or trying to grab a spare heater without dipping into the grocery fund, the G3C just looks like a slam dunk. And Taurus knows that. They market the hell out of it. Their packaging's slick, their promo shots show clean machining, and they push the new and improved line hard. After the G2C's reputation for being rough around the edges, Taurus came out swinging, saying this one had tighter tolerances, a better trigger, and more aggressive slide cuts. Problem is, it's still a Taurus, and if you've spent time behind a bench with one, you start noticing the seams. But I'll save that for later. The reason this thing stays hot in 2025 is that people keep repeating what they hear in surface-level reviews. Quick tabletop unboxings with 50 rounds downrange, followed by a solid gun for the price conclusion. Yeah, if all you're doing is mag dumping into cardboard at 5 yards, you're probably not going to notice the creeping slide wear or the extractor failing to grab brass. You're not going to see that magazine that randomly drops free or feel the slide grind like sandpaper when it's dirty. But folks see a gun that looks tactical and costs half of what a Glock runs, and they hit the buy button without thinking twice. It's not that it doesn't work. It's that it doesn't hold up. And once you start putting rounds through it, like your life actually depends on it, you'll see real quick what corners were cut. Let's get into that next. Now, the moment I racked the G3C is when I realized there's something off about it. That's what hit me the first time I got hands-on with a Taurus G3C. The slide felt gritty, almost like there was unpolished metal grinding underneath. I figured maybe it just needed a break-in period or a heavier lube job. But no, what followed over the next few range trips wasn't just rough around the edges. It was the kind of inconsistent, unreliable behavior that made you question every round in the mag. The feeding issues were the first red flag. With decent brass-cased ammo like Federal American Eagle, I was getting the occasional failure to feed, usually with the first or last round in the mag. Tried Blazer brass. Same deal. Tossed in some steel-cased Wolf out of curiosity, and it was a stovepipe party. It felt like the feed ramp geometry just didn't want to play nice with certain bullet profiles. I've seen this same gun fail to feed Hornady critical defense, which is a huge no-no if you're carrying this thing for self-defense. You can't just pick ammo that quote-unquote mostly works. You need something that cycles everything every time, no excuses. Then came the trigger weirdness. The flat-face look is nice, but it's all show. The break feels more like a crunch than a snap, and the safety blade sits just high enough that it can bind up if your finger placement isn't perfect. I've seen this happen more than once when shooters are wearing gloves. That's a functional problem, not a preference issue. If your trigger safety hangs up under pressure, you've got a failure waiting to happen. The wear patterns were what sealed it for me. Around 700 rounds in, I checked out the slide and locking lugs, and they were already showing shiny spots where the finish had worn completely off. There were metal burrs forming on the inside of the slide rails. It is not just cosmetic wear, but legit deformation is starting. This is the kind of stuff that leads to long-term function issues, or those out-of-battery malfunctions, premature unlock misalignment under recoil. Magazines were another mixed bag. The factory 12-rounders felt inconsistent. Sometimes they dropped free. Other times I had to yank them. And hollow points in particular seemed to nosedive inside the mag, especially when chambering the first round. I've shot plenty of budget pistols. Some are rough, but reliable. The G3C is rough and unpredictable. And when you're talking about a gun, you might actually trust your life to unpredictability isn't a risk you can afford. And once those functional problems start piling up, it all leads you to the next uncomfortable truth. The gun just isn't built to hold up. That's what happened when I field stripped my G3C after barely 2 weekends of shooting. The outside looked fine, but the guts told a whole different story. Slide rails were already showing sharp, uneven wear, and the frame was holding on to copper-colored flakes from the guide rod scraping during recoil. You'd think it went through 2 years of hard carry, not a few hundred rounds at the range. Thing is, this isn't some freak lemon. This is the result of what Taurus puts into the gun, and more importantly, what they leave out. You start noticing where they cut costs when you really get inside it. That guide rod, for example, is a lightweight polymer setup that flexes just enough to matter. It doesn't seem like much until you notice the slide binding ever so slightly during return. Then a stovepipe shows up. Then the slide starts to rack slower. It builds up, and the gun slowly starts losing the clean, crisp function it had on day one. The barrel hood on that same G3C had its finish flaking off the corners, and the feed ramp looked like it had been touched with a rough file. Not polished, not tuned, just raw cuts and edges. That sort of thing might not stop the gun from cycling ball ammo, but once you start loading JHPs, especially with softer ogivs or wider mouths, that rough surface turns into a problem. I've watched rounds nosedive and bind right on that edge. It's like feeding a mag into a cheap airsoft gun and hoping it seats right every time. Doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Another G3C I handled had so much lateral slide play in the battery that I could feel the rattle in hand like holding a half-spent rental gun from a public indoor range. Except this one was privately owned and had less than 800 rounds through it. I've owned striker-fired pistols that cost under $300 and still lock up like a bank vault. So this kind of slop, that's not just wear. That's built-in looseness catching up to you. Even the finish tells you the gun isn't built to last. That so-called Tennifer-style treatment on the slide wears off almost immediately on contact points. Carry it in a basic IWB holster in the summer, and sweat will start eating through any protection that's left. A guy at my local range brought his G3C in for a malfunction, and when we opened it up, there were tiny rust spots forming around the striker channel. Barely a few months old. You start to realize the problem isn't just that the gun's cheap. The problem is that the cheapness lives where it matters most inside, where you can't see it until it starts giving out. That's where the G3C starts falling apart. And here's the part that really makes you shake your head, because even after seeing all of that stripped-down, bare-bones construction, people are still buying the G3C like it's a hidden gem. Doesn't matter if I'm at a mom-and-pop store, or a big box place like Academy or Rural King, that gun is always in stock, usually paired with some kind of rebate or bonus mag gimmick. I had a guy standing next to me at the counter once say, "Man, for under $250, it's a no-brainer." I didn't say anything, just nodded. But inside I was thinking, yeah, it's a no-brainer if you're not planning to actually use it past a few hundred rounds. And that's exactly how they get folks. It's not a bad-looking pistol. In fact, if you didn't know what you were looking at, it almost gives off Glock 26 vibes. Slide cuts, decent grip texture, and even an optional optics-ready version if you're feeling fancy. Taurus packages it well. Clean lines, a flat-face trigger, and that so-called budget gun that punches above its weight pitch that's everywhere online. You search up reviews, and 9 times out of 10, you're getting guys emptying 2 mags into cardboard and calling it a day. No stress tests, no long-term feedback. Just feels good in the hand. No malfunctions today. Buy one. And people do, over and over again. I've had 2 shooting buddies buy G3Cs based on that exact loop. Both of them were newer to pistols, both convinced by YouTube clips and slick marketing. And to be fair, for the first few hundred rounds, they had no complaints. It wasn't until things started binding up, magazines stopped dropping clean, and feed issues became a pattern that they started asking questions. One even joked, "I thought I just got a lemon." Like the idea of the pistol being flawed didn't cross his mind. That's the kind of surface-level appeal the G3C lives on. Not how it performs under pressure, just how it feels in the first 100 rounds and what kind of price tag is hanging off it. Taurus also knows how to lean into that loyalty from the G2C crowd. I remember when the G2C was everywhere. Same strategy, same kind of hype. So when the G3C dropped, it pulled in that whole group of budget-minded shooters, hoping Taurus had finally ironed out the old issues. But really, the problems are still there. They're just buried under better lighting and a new slide cut. It sells because it's everywhere, and it promises more than it's built to deliver. And for some folks who never push their pistol past a lazy afternoon at the range, it holds up just long enough. But if you're looking for something to count on long-term, the G3C is just polished enough to fool you before it starts breaking down. Now look, I get it. Not everyone has $600 or $700 to throw at a carry pistol, and for a lot of folks, price is the biggest factor. That's exactly why the G3C keeps moving units. But here's the good news in 2025. There are way better options in that same budget bracket that don't ask you to compromise on build quality or long-term reliability. You don't have to settle for a gun that feels like it was assembled with leftover parts from a toolbox in Rio. First up is the PSA Dagger. For just a bit more than the G3C, which is usually around $300 to $350, you're getting a striker-fired pistol built around Glock Gen 3 specs, with better finishing rock-solid aftermarket compatibility and a stainless steel guide rod right out of the box. This thing feels tight, and the hand has a better trigger, and you're not dealing with weird tolerances or off-brand mags. It takes standard Glock 19 magazines, which opens you up to tons of options for carry range and extended mags. For the money, it's a huge leap forward in performance and durability. Then there's the S&W SD9VE or SD9 2.0, depending on where you're shopping. It's a proven platform from a reputable name, and while the trigger isn't amazing, the gun runs reliably, handles well, and has a stainless steel slide with a durable Armornite finish. These go for around $270 to $320, and they've got the kind of build quality that can handle higher round counts without rattling itself loose. Plus, it's backed by Smith & Wesson's solid customer service. Another one to keep an eye on is the Canik MC9. Now this is a slightly higher-end pick, floating closer to $399, but you're getting a fantastic trigger, excellent build materials, and real-world reliability. The slide is optics ready, the machining is tight, and it feels like a much more expensive gun in hand. If you can stretch the budget, this is the best next-level option under $450. And don't sleep on used guns either. A Gen 3 Glock 19, a first-gen M&P, or a Ruger SR9 can all be used for under $400 and will outlast the G3C without breaking a sweat. So before you grab a G3C just because it's cheap, know that there are smarter picks out there that won't leave you second-guessing after 800 rounds.